Okay, I'm going to walk through setting up a program to carve those clocks that were at the beginning of the video. So I'm using a piece of poplar. It's a scrap off of another project, or just a piece off of another project. It's 12 inches wide by 11 and 1/8 and almost 3/4 of an inch. And for the first part of the carve, I'm going to start out down here in the lower left hand corner. I'm going to use two different files for this. If I can find the Etsy store, I will link that in the description below. But I'm going to bring in the clock face first, and I'm going to group that, and I'm going to resize it to fit my project. And I'm going to center it up, make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Let me center that up. And I'm going to go ahead and create a hole that is going to be for my clock mechanism. Let me erase one of those. I created two. I'm going to take and set it up, or set it in the center of the carve. And you'll see it's offset. There's the 1/4 inch in the center. I'm going to use the other one to trim out stuff in the Liberty Bell portion that I'll be bringing in. I'm going to go ahead and do a vector validation on this to see if there's anything that I need to fix. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ungroup this. I'm going to take out some components that I know I don't need. Some of these rings. Alright, so I'm going to group this back together for now. And I'm going to move it off to the side. And I'm going to bring in the second file that I'm going to use. And I'm going to go ahead and group that. And I'm going to run a vector validation on it. Alright. On the Liberty Bell portion, I'm going to laser engrave that, and I don't have a JTech laser for my Onefinity, and I do run Lightburn, so I'm going to show you how I'm going to engrave this, carve it with the Onefinity, and then engrave it in a separate machine as well. So I'm not going to worry about this on the Liberty Bell, but I am going to come up here and fix this text. So I'm going to ungroup that. And I'm going to pull this text away so I can get rid of that overlap. I don't want to go too far. I'm going to hold down shift and grab that R. And yeah, that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this ring as well. And I'm going to group the rest of this back together. Alright, that kind of looks good to me. So I'm going to group them together and put it in the center of the carve. And I'm going to make sure, let's see, let me go back. Let me ungroup into group layers. There we go. I'm going to make sure that that portion is centered up. Alright, now I'm going to go through and I'm going to ungroup the whole thing, and I'm going to group it back together, but it's going to be in smaller groups. I'm going to create profiles too, so I'm going to highlight the profile here, and I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to make layers, not profiles. So I'm going to create this profile here as a layer. I'm going to have it in blue. Turn that profile off, get rid of it. I'm going to come back and I'm going to get all of these Roman numerals, group them, place them in a layer, and turn that layer off. And I'm going to do this for everything in this carve. That way, to me, it helps me keep up with my toolpaths a lot easier. I'm used to working in layers with CAD. So I'm going to group this, and then I'm going to copy to a new layer. I'm going to say large text. Alright, I'm going to turn that layer off. Delete those numbers. Let me go ahead and get the markers. And what I'm going to do with the markers, because of the tool that I'm going to use for that is a 30-degree engraver. It's a V-cutter, but it's engraver. I'm going to offset these probably about 15 thousandths of an inch. That way my engraver can fit in to the markers, the minute marker and hour markers. So I'm going to offset outward. I'm going to click the original group, delete that, and then I'm going to place the new offsets into a group of their own as well. And then I'm going to create a layer. Okay, group. And I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call it markers. I'm going to come in and I'm going to turn that layer off, delete that group. And I'm left with this. Now I'm going to laser engrave the stars and the bell, but I'm going to V-cut the text and the ring. I'm sorry, I'm usually quicker at this, I guess. I'm a little camera shy. Alright, so I'm going to group that together, and I'm going to copy to a new layer, and we'll say small text. And give it a color. Alright. Turn that layer off. Delete it. See, all of the layers are still there, but it just helps whenever we go to carve this. Alright, before I go any further, I'm going to come down here and trim out a lot of this area that I'm not going to need. I'm going to get this outside ring. And a lot of this will be covered up with, there's a grommet that comes in the pack with the clock mechanism. So I'm not going to really be too worried about it. Actually, I missed some of, messed up my circle there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this. Yeah, I trimmed out some stuff I didn't need to trim out. So I'm going to go Escape Control Z. And get the stuff that I needed to trim out. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to create this as a layer 2. That is going to be pocketed out for the clock mechanism. So we're going to go ahead and turn that off, and we're going to delete that. Alright, the rest of this is going into its own layer because I'm going to export that as a SVG. And I'm going to open it up in Lightburn. That way I can engrave it with my laser. So I don't need that anymore. what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that layer back on, and I'm going to turn the outside profile on, and I'm going to export this as an SVG, and we're going to say new clock face for carve, and I'm going to save that to my desktop. Alright, now I'm going to set up my toolpaths for this. I'm going to go ahead and turn that bell and stars off because I don't need it, and I don't need that outside profile just yet. I'm going to go ahead and get my large text, and I'm going to V-cut that with a Spatul W6011 carbide cutter. And I'm going to save this into multiple files. So let's preview toolpath. I like that. Let me go ahead and turn the Roman numerals off. Let's get the small text because it's going to also be with that same V cutter. And I'm just going to go ahead and let it default. Go to the default depth for the V cutting. Alright. Let me turn that layer off. And I need to get that small pocket. Now, this small pocket is going to go full depth. It is with a down cutter, but it's an 1/8 inch bit. I don't recommend drilling with a down cut, but in this case it's going to spiral down. We'll preview that and you'll see it cuts it out. That's where my clock mechanism is going to go, and that's also where I'm going to center off of to carve out the back of the clock for the clock mechanism. So let me go ahead and turn that layer off, and I'm going to turn the profile on, and I'm going to cut this out with a Onefinity CNC W8 1/4 inch down cut. It's a really awesome bit. I really like it. I am going to add tabs to this because I use some projects I will use that stock for sanding. It makes it easier to sand for me. It doesn't rip the paper up as bad, well, at least not for me anyways. So I am going to add a ramp, and we'll calculate that. Let's preview all toolpaths. Yeah, I like that. Okay, before I go any further, I'm going to let's check the time. 18 minutes. I'm okay with that. I'm going to save this all visible toolpaths into multiple files. Save it to my Onefinity, and let's say we'll call it new clock front 2.0. I'm going to save it to my desktop, and then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete all of my toolpaths, and I'm going to create another carve, but I'm going to do it on the back. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring that small pocket back in so you can reference the center of the carve, and I'm going to create a rectangle, like say square, and I'm going to make a square of 2 inches, 2 1/4 inch by 2 1/4 inch with a radius of 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to place that in the center, and I'm also going to go back to my job setup. So I'm going to go into edit, job size and position, and I'm going to reference off the center of this carve on the back side of the clock. So let me go ahead and delete this. I don't need this down here either. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to pocket down, and I'm going to use that 1/4 inch end mill again, and I'm going to go down just a little bit over a 1/2 inch. Alright, so we'll preview all, and that's what the back of the clock's going to look like. Now keep in mind the face is going to be there. With this one, I don't want to flip it and zero off the edge. The last time I did that, my numbers, the face of the clock was off in relation to the mechanism, so I found that taking the card, flipping it over, and zeroing off the center with a 1/4 inch dowel helps out a lot. So that's what I'm going to do for this build. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this as another file, and it's going to be the back side of the clock, and it'll be on my desktop. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Lightburn and pull that SVG up. Now I'm in Lightburn, and I'm going to pull that file, that SVG that we created, into Lightburn. I'm going to make sure that my dimensions are locked, and I'm going to go ahead and maximize my window, and I'm going to drag this to the center of my honeycomb bed plate. I am using a Monport 60 watt manual focus CO2 laser. You can see I've got a couple of layers here, but we're going to add a few more. So I'm going to use this profile layer here, and I'm going to go ahead and leave it where it's at. That is going to, we're going to use that to reference where we're going to place the clock into the laser, and then we're going to engrave the bell and the stars here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide that layer, and I'm going to click and ungroup this, and I'm going to add the stars to their own layer. Let me hold down shift. They're going to go into layer 1, and in layer 1 it's going to be a fill, and yeah, I'm okay with it going that deep, that powerful. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide that. Let's see here, there we go, that base layer was still there. Alright, so into the bell, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick these lines here, and I'm going to run a line and fill on this thing, and I'm going to use multiple layers for it. So everything in the outline gets placed into layer 2. Let me highlight a bunch of this right quick. Place it into layer 2. Same for this. And to layer 2, line it. Yep, I'll take that 20% power. Let me grab the text. It's going to be in its own layer as well. We're going to go into layer 3. Alright, and I'm going to do a fill pass on it as well. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and then everything left here in purple, I'm going to take it and I'm going to move it down. I want that to be the last pass that I do, and I'm okay with it being a fill also. Alright, so like I said, what I'm going to do is when I place this into the laser machine, it's already going to be carved, and I'm going to run this pass, this profile pass, first on a piece of cardboard, and maybe a little bit of the bell. That way I've got a good orientation of where the carve is going to be, or where the engraving is going to be, and I'll set the clock in the laser and hopefully engrave the Liberty Bell and the stars where we want them to be on the clock. So let me get to that.
Alright, so the front of the clock is all cut out. I am going to clean off my spoil board. I'm going to flip this around and I'm going to show you how I'm going to center off of this. I'm on the back of the clock now. The tabs, one of them did break, but the tabs are holding it in place. I did put a couple pieces of tape and some CA glue on the other side. And if you've noticed in the video, the clock face looks a little bit odd. It looks a little bit like pink. That is because I have put wood putty over the top. I do that before I paint anything or before I carve, and I'll sand it down first and then I will put wood putty on it. That way when I go to paint, it doesn't bleed out into the wood as bad. There's still a little bit of bleeding sometimes, it just depends. So I'm going to drive this thing into here, get it nice and centered up, and there we go. I'm going to take that probe down into the hole, and that lets me know that I am in the middle of the clock. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over here and I will probe. Actually, I won't probe. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to set my X, Y, and Z position there. Now, I will have to reset my Z when I change over to my end mill. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Whoop. Haha, let me, I'll keep that in the video. I messed up right there, but it's not going to matter. It's going to be pocketed out. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, but I did. So I will check my Z over here. Oh my God. So I'll keep that in there. That way you know that, hey, people make mistakes all the damn time. It's part of it. So change probe out for the actual tool this time. Shit. Oops, sorry about that. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is, there's my beautiful mark right there, made a huge mistake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down, I'm going to touch off and zero my Z position here now. So I'm going to probe for Z. And if that's the worst mistake I make for the rest of the project, I'm completely cool with that, because after we get through with here, remember we got to put in a laser, so we have to hope and pray that everything was good when we converted that SVG over. So let's run this and see how it turns out. Let's see how much of my mistake is still there. Pretty good bit. Yeah, that'll sand out. I'm going to go ahead and sand the back of it, and I'm going to go ahead and paint it, and we'll do a edit, and you won't have to endure the painting. Alright, I know this looks like a hot mess so far, but what I did was I sprayed over my wood putty. You can see some of the wood putty here. I sprayed over the wood putty with this clear gloss polyurethane, and I did that way I could go back and spray over with this satin Canyon black. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to mix some epoxy up, and I'm going to use some red dye, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to epoxy in the Roman numerals, and I'm also going to epoxy in the hour markers right here too. So I'm going to go ahead and epoxy all that in, let it dry, fight the bubbles, and hope and pray that I don't get bubbles in the finished product. And tomorrow, after that's all done, I'm going to sand this off. It should look good, I hope. And then we're going to put it in the laser engraver, and we're going to engrave the Liberty Bell on the front. Okay, you may or may not be able to hear me very well. I've got a mask on. But this, my epoxy's dried. I went ahead and I decided to go ahead and pour red into all of the lettering and the numbers. I didn't do the minute markers. I'm going to sand this off. We're going to see what it looks like. Keep in mind that I did spray paint this, but I've got wood putty underneath the wood. And I did paint the letters. If I did it right, what will happen is when I sand this off, there'll be a little black outline in the numbers. Looks pretty neat. And I'll probably fast forward through all this so I'm not boring you to death. I'm using a 220 grit on this, and I have knocked a couple of the sides off of it already, so let's get started. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and complete this, but I'm not really happy with how this turned out. You can see there's a lot of bleeding from the dye that I used with my epoxy. This is the first time I've ever had this done, or had this happen. I'm gonna try to fix it, and one of the things that I think I'm gonna try to do is go with a darker stain on this to see if it'll kind of camouflage. I'm gonna continue to sand a little bit more. Of course, we still got to put it in the laser engraver. I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. But I also have some bubbles that I noticed this morning when I picked up the piece, that I had a lot of bubbles. If you can see right there, I'm going to go back and I'm going to fill those in with some CA glue and sand it and see where it goes from there. I do apologize. I hope you can hear me. I've got you inside my CNC laser. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw an outline of the clock, and we'll go from there. So hang tight. I did start on the bell, the Liberty Bell portion of it too, just to make sure I had my orientation correct. So I'm going to back this out of the way, and you'll notice the clock has changed as well. I'm trying to salvage this build as best I possibly can. It looks like a hodgepodge, I know, but I think maybe I can save this. I'm hoping I can anyway. So get this set up on this. Bring it in. Measure it up off the clock. I did see it move a little bit. Maybe it won't be completely out of focus. We'll see. Okay, almost finished product now. Of course, you guys saw all the mistakes that I made. I made sure I left them in. If you can kind of see, what I went ahead and did was I did stain the rest of the board red, and I sanded that down with 320 grit sandpaper back to where I could see the wood finish again. Then I went back over with a navy blue stain. It's the same stain that I use for American flags whenever I make something, a carve that's American flag. Inside of the Liberty Bell, I painted with a gold. You can't really see it that good, but it's there. Not too happy with how the L's and the Liberty Bell turned out. I should have cut that a little bit deeper. I've got poly on it right now. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and let it dry, and we'll go from there. I did paint the stars white, but I want it to look kind of rustic to kind of match the rest of the clock. So once it dries, we'll put the hands on it, and we'll see what it looks like from that point. All right, here is the finished product. As you can see, it didn't turn out the way I expected it to go, but I was able to work around my mistakes and finish the project. I kind of like the look. The more I look at it, the more I like it. So, if you've made it this far, I appreciate the view, and if you haven't done so, please like and subscribe below. I will try to get content up once a week if possible, if my schedule allows. So I'll be doing a video hopefully this weekend and posting by the middle of week next week if time will allow. So once again, thanks for the view. Have a good one.